The History of Agile with Jeff Sutherland.
The Azure DevOps Podcast is a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Each show brings you hard-hitting interviews with industry experts, innovating better methods, and sharing success stories. Listen on to learn how to increase quality, ship quickly, and operate well. And now your host, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome to the show. I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host for helping you and your teams move fast and deliver quality and to run your software with confidence in Azure, all while using everything that the .NET ecosystem has to offer. The podcast is sponsored by ClearMeasure, a full-service software architecture and engineering firm that serves companies building mission-critical software systems. And quick announcement, we are in our second year of our leadership forums. We have two. We have a software architect forum and a software leadership forum for managers and executives. And these are peer advisory groups. The architect forum is more on the technical side, and the software leadership forum is more on the managerial and executive side. And we understand learning technical topics for developers, really easy. There's tons of resources out there. But for people leading groups of developers and teams and departments of developers, it's a little bit harder to find. And so I facilitate these forums on a monthly basis, and we get together your peer professionals and have some really good, robust discussions. So sign up at the link in the show notes, and you can also go to clearmeasure.com/forums and sign up there. I'm really excited about our guest today on the show, and our guest is Jeff Sutherland. And Jeff is the co-creator of Scrum and a leading expert on how the framework has evolved to meet the needs of today's businesses. The framework he developed in 1993 and formalized in 1995 with Ken Schwaber, and it's since been adopted by the vast majority of software development companies around the world. But Jeff realized that the benefits of Scrum are not limited to software and product development, and he's adapted this successful strategy for several other industries, including finance and healthcare, higher education, and telecom. As the CEO of Scrum Inc., he sets the vision for success with Scrum, and he continues to share best practices with organizations around the globe and has written extensively on Scrum rules and methods. With a deep understanding of business process, gleaned from years as CTO and CEO of over 11 and counting different software companies, Jeff is able to describe the high-level organizational benefits of Scrum and what it takes to create hyper-productive teams. So, Jeff, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. Great to talk about Agile always.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So many of the listeners use various parts of things under the overall Agile umbrella. But with our growth and so many young developers and professionals who've not only just gotten in the industry this decade, but maybe even the last 7 years, some of the history isn't taught with great fidelity. And so I wanted someone with your experience to be able to kind of draw that back into the present conversation. But before I kind of get into that and ask you about the history of Agile, I always like to ask the guest, what were the turning points or the big points in your life and career that kind of got you into this whole sector, into this whole part of the industry to begin with?
Well, Agile started for me back as a West Point cadet. I spent years training with the U.S. gymnastics Olympic team. I was a gymnast. And in the last year, I was training officer at West Point, training a company to march on the parade field. And what I learned was that making work visible, which is the basis of the Toyota way and now the Agile way, created extreme performance. It took a company that was the worst company at West Point. In less than 3 months, they became the best marching company on the parade field.
Wow.
And that was kind of the beginning of realizing the visibility of work and having people self-organize around that visible portrayal of what needs to be done and the impediments to the blocking. That is like the key to high-level performance. From West Point, I went into the U.S. Air Force, and for over 10 years, I was a fighter pilot, mainly flying F-4 Phantom aircraft, including 100 missions over North Vietnam. So
wow.
I was battle tested in Agile, dodging bullets over North Vietnam. Over half the people I flew with got shot down.
Mm.
And I was the co-pilot or the wingman of the base commander, who was the last surviving ace of World War II.
Mm.
Okay, so I've been trained by the best in agility over the skies of North Vietnam, and everything in Scrum is actually the operational piece is all based on that fighter pilot way of working. 1975, or actually my last tour in the Air Force was at the U.S. Air Force Academy as a professor of mathematics. And they sent me back to school at Stanford. And I spent a third of my time working in the Stanford AI lab that was run by McCarthy, the inventor of Lisp, one of the two godfathers of AI. And there's a strong AI thread that started way back in 1970, and then today has become extremely important to Scrum and Agile. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But coming out of the Air Force, I went into the medical school and spent another decade doing supercomputer models of the human cell to figure out why does a cell become a cancer cell. There's several steps. Working with the leading researchers in the world, my thesis advisor was the editor of the Journal of the National Cancer Institute,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the key players worldwide in cancer research. So I was, again, fortunate to work with the best. And we figured out that modeling a human cell, it's a complex adaptive system. And so not only is a cell, but every organ in your body, and you are a complex adaptive system. And then when you go to the team level, a team is a complex adaptive system.
Mm-hmm.
So the theory behind Scrum is complex adaptive systems theory. And the most important mathematical proof in complex adaptive systems theory was done in Los Alamos labs. And it was a paper on artificial life simulation on the computer, which showed that systems evolve faster if the degrees of freedom are maximized up to the edge of chaos.
Mm.
And when I read that, it was about, I think, 1987, I read that. The light bulb went off. I was running this huge banking project that was years late, tens of millions of dollars over budget. And I said, wow, this project is stuck because it has too many controls, too many reports, too many meetings. They can't get anything done. We need to unleash the teams, maximize the degrees of freedom, build autonomous, self-organizing teams based on complex adaptive systems theory. That is the root of Agile. And most people never even talk about that. They don't even know what that is, right?
Right.
And that's why we have so many failed Agile teams out there. 58% of Scrum teams, Agile teams in general, are late, over budget, with unhappy customers.
Mm-hmm.
It's so bad that when you try to get ChatGPT to work with you in Scrum, I have GPTs now working with me in Scrum. They don't know how to do Scrum because they're trained on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It's only when we put the red book behind me, Scrum, the art of doing twice the work in half the time, we put that into the GPT, and then all of a sudden, the GPT immediately knows how to do Scrum planning, how to create buffers, how to do estimation, how to set up sprints. Our goal right now is to relegate 90% of the overhead in Scrum to a GPT. That's what I'm doing with my Scrum teams.
Okay.
And I have one of my teams right now is 6 AIs. There's only one human on it. I'm the product owner. And we just created a new product in record time using AI. So fighter pilot, operation of Scrum, medical research, complex adaptive systems. A lot of people don't understand. I had $30 million from the National Cancer Institute to do this research. That is what Scrum is based on.
Mm. Nice.
And it all occurred by 1993 when I was hired out of the medical school into a large banking company where all their projects were late.
Mm-hmm.
And I went in one day to the CEO and I said, Ron, have you noticed all projects are late? He said, yes. He said, we run 150 banks, and every morning, at least 5 of the CEOs or the CIOs of the banks, they call me up and they scream at me. And I said, Ron, it's getting worse. It's going to get a lot worse. You need to do something. And he said, what should I do? And I said, we can't fix the whole bank at once. Let's take the worst division in the bank, the one that's losing the most money, and you give it to everybody, sales, marketing, support, all the development, finances, and I'll run that using a complex adaptive systems model, small autonomous collaborating teams. And you and the senior management can be my board of directors. And once a month, we can check in. The rest of the time, you're going to have to stay out of there because you just screw it up like all the waterfall projects you've got running. So if you do that, I will fix one division.
And it worked.
And he said to me, he said, Jeff, that's going to be a big headache. Do you really want that? I mean, you're working with all the technology. That's fun stuff. You're going to have to take something that's broken and actually fix it. I said, we need to do it. Give it to me. So he did. Within 6 months, that was the most profitable business unit in the entire bank. It went from the worst to the best. And we did it by implementing what we call today Scrum at Scale. It was the first prototype of Scrum at Scale in 1983. So a lot of Agile people, the Agile Manifesto was written in 2001.
Right.
They think that sprung out, spontaneously out of nowhere. No. There's a huge history, particularly in Scrum, that goes all the way back to the Artificial Intelligence Lab in Stanford in 1970. And it took, the first real prototype was 1983. It took years of prototyping multiple companies before we formalized Scrum in 1993. So Scrum was a long time in making. And then it was not until 2001 when the leadership of Scrum and the leadership of extreme programming, along with a group of consultants who had written books and so forth, were pulled together. Scrum and XP were the only widely deployed practices.
Yeah.
There were no other team processes, but both Scrum and XP had hundreds, maybe thousands of teams out there. And so in 2001, when we met with the 17 people that wrote the manifesto, everybody shared what they were doing, the books they were writing. The XP guys shared XP, the Scrum guys shared Scrum. And then we agreed on the umbrella, the Agile Manifesto values and principles that applied to both Scrum and XP and also fit with what the consultants were doing and writing and coaching and so forth. So Agile has, for me, a long history that goes way back, even before Stanford, back to 1963 at West Point, making work visible so that people could self-organize to achieve great things, just like they did at Toyota, right? So that's kind of a long snapshot of history.
Well, that's
Maybe we could zero in on something more specific that might be of interest to your listeners.
absolutely. Well, it's fascinating history. And you fast forward to 2024, and the present day common discussion on Scrum is haggling over sprint lengths and when should we do backlog grooming, like really in the weeds things, almost like getting back to dogma about specific process points as opposed to the theory that you mentioned. So what can we point listeners to anchor them back to the theory of complex systems so that they can understand the essence of what they're trying to do?
Well, I've written a new book to try to go back through all the fundamental things that led to Scrum and Agile. And it's called First Principles in Scrum. And I'm actually I implemented Scrum and with multiple AIs working with me. And our goal was to do a new chapter every sprint. And we do weekly sprints. So we are now up to 46 chapters. And both Amazon and LeanPub have advised us we need to split it into multiple volumes.
Yeah.
So today I'm launching the Volume 1, First Principles in Scrum Foundations. And this talks about the beginning of the technology stack for Agile. So one of the things I've done with is to try to explain this is to go back to the telecom stack. There's an OSI telecom stack.
Okay.
That is 7 layers. Okay, so At the bottom layer, there's a physical layer that the wire connects everything. Then there's a data link layer, network layer, transport layer, session layer, presentation layer, and then the application layer, and your iPhone works.
Mm-hmm.
So what people don't really know what's going on there, but if anything in one of those layers breaks, guess what?
Everything's
Your
broken.
iPhone breaks.
Yeah.
Well, we have a technology stack in Agile that the book is all about, and it is 8 layers. So we start at the physical layer in physics.
Okay.
And I was trained as a radiation physicist and became a professor of radiology. So I'm well grounded in physics. And a lot of the early thinking, and again, I was funded by the National Cancer Institute to do all this research in the radiology department. And so a lot of that early thinking is all around figuring out the physics of the human cell and using radiation therapy to kill cancer cells. I mean, it's all physics, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
understand quantum physics to do radiation therapy.
Yeah.
So the book starts with physics. And today, the most amazing thing is Wolfram's physics project. Wolfram was a professor of physics at Caltech. He was a protege of Feynman, one of the most famous Nobel laureates in the last century. And he got bored being a physics professor, so he went and started a company and built this product called Mathematica, which is the leading simulation tool for physics, mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
And because he's a theoretical physicist, he has a lot of theoretical physicists in his company building software for the simulation tool. And they said, why don't we simulate the universe?
Mm-hmm.
Started to build a simulation of what is actually going on.
Yeah, talk about a complex system.
At the molecular level.
Hmm.
And one of the first things they found out was things are unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
To predict even when a project is going to be done requires infinite computing power. The simulations have to run to the before you know what's going to happen. This is the root of Agile.
Yeah.
You can't know what's going to happen until it happens, right?
Yeah.
So that means that all of biology, the next level in the Agile technology stack is biology. All of biology has had to grow up in an environment where you never know what's going to happen next. So inspect, adapt is fundamental to evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And those who inspected and adapt best survived. And that's true of companies today. Those who inspect and adapt best live and the rest die. Now, that led to the evolution of the human brain, which is the third level of the Agile technology stack.
Okay.
And the latest and greatest model of the human brain is called Friston's free energy model of the brain. And it's a mathematical model that's used to build autonomous robots. Now, in one sense, Scrum came out of autonomous robots because back just a couple of years before we formalized Scrum, I was president of an AI company building database technology.
Is in the 80s?
And in the late 80s
mm-hmm.
and early 90s. And it was about 1990, 91 that 5 guys from the MIT AI lab walked down the street to my company and they said, we need some development space because we're starting a new company. It's going to be called iRobot. And will you rent us some space? So for the next few years, they worked right in my development area.
Oh, wow.
And the robot would be running around and run into my office sometimes, trying to hunt me down with infrared heat-seeking sensors. And on Fridays, we'd always have happy hour. And often their professor would come by, Professor Rodney Brooks, who developed the what he called the subsumption architecture for autonomous robots, because these robots have no database. They only have streaming data from sensors.
Mm-hmm.
They have no central processor. Each leg had a chip that moved the leg. chip in the spine, coordinated legs, and a neural network chip in the head. And when you turned it on, there was no data in the system, only the neural network. And you turn it on, and all of a sudden the thing starts, it has multiple legs. It kind of looks like an octopus kind of flapping. And in less than a minute, it's on its feet. It looks like a baby learning how to walk. And in about 3 minutes, it's running around the room. Like, Professor Brooke, that's amazing. From nothing, you boot up this really smart robot. And I said, I think we could take some of those developers back at the bank. We could implement some simple rules like you've implemented on the robot. And I bet you we could boot up a super smart team that's super fast in a week. Do you think that's possible? And Professor Brooks said, I don't know, but I think you should try it. So I did. It's called Scrum. Now, you mentioned that a lot of people are arguing about how long sprints should be. Okay, these people are not doing what those robots did, right?
Right.
And because of that, they're slow and they're late and their customers not happy. And so it's agile in name only, most of out there. And what a lot of people say, well, agile is dead, right?
Maybe the marketing of it, the old marketing.
The old agile is dead because what's happened, we have the physics, biology, neuroscience. Out of biology came complex adaptive systems through simulation of artificial life. Scrum was directly an implementation of complex adaptive systems. Scrum at scale takes it to the organizational level. But now what's emerging is Scrum and AI, and it is extreme agile. And analysts are projecting by 2030, teams will be 30 to 100 times faster. And I'm telling every Scrum Master out there and every executive, if your team is not at least 30 times faster than it is today, by 2030, you're going to be on the street. Your job is gone.
So what does that look like?
I think Agile is dead. Get ready to get unemployed because we are moving to extreme Agile.
Many thanks to our podcast sponsor, ClearMeasure. ClearMeasure is a software architecture company that empowers clients' development teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their systems with confidence. Whether starting a new project or developing new technologies or techniques, ClearMeasure sets up your team to deliver world-class results. Learn more at www.clearmeasure.com. ClearMeasure, empowering software delivery. ClearMeasure is also happy to be a sponsor of the video podcast, Programming with Palermo. Watch, learn, and program alongside Chief Architect Jeffrey Palermo. Videos are added weekly and available on syndicated locations supporting video podcast or by visiting palermo.network. Tune in today.
That's interesting that in the late 90s or in the 90s, extreme programming was the other approach. And are those terms going to come back together? Extreme Scrum or extreme Agile?
That's the term I'm using right now, extreme Agile, because when you start working with an AI team, just to give you an example, I run 4 companies. Every one of those companies needs expense reports multiple times a month. And I use Expensify.
Okay. Yep. Receipts.
It takes me so many hours to create expense reports. I am more than a year behind in expenses. So I said, my only hope is to get the AI to do it because I'm getting later and later. It's not getting better. I'm getting further and further behind. So we've been using AI on the Scrum teams. I work with 2 Scrum teams every day with 2 different companies. And we've been using AI on the Scrum teams. And I thought, why don't I create a new product with a team that's only AIs and see what we can do? A product that completely takes away expenses and does them for me. No more expense reports.
Okay.
So I got all my bank statements, put them in Dropbox. And then I turned the AI loose. I said, here's all the data. Over a year behind expense expense reports. Let's build a system that generates them all. And in 5 one-week sprints, it generated all the expense reports for 4 companies for an entire quarter in 1 second.
And it's correct?
Absolutely.
So you said
it's completely auditable. Now, what people don't realize, the AI is not doing the expense reports. The AI is figuring out how to write Python code, which is auditable and provably correct and traceable back to the original invoice.
So I have to dig into this. You said you're the product owner, and also I'm gonna say you're the software architect. And
absolutely.
And you have 6. You said 6 AIs, but 6 what's? 6 computers, 6 programs. Like what? 6 what?
Okay, so I have a GPT called Scrum Sage Zen Edition. And in that GPT, it's available to everybody. You can log on and I have a persona called Ono, who's the Scrum Master.
Okay.
He's a great Scrum Master. And then I started working I created another GPT that was a Python programmer. Also, there's a Python GPT, the leading Python GPT in OpenAI's stack. He's a member of the team. I have JetBrains AI, which is, I use the JetBrains IDE. So it has its own AI that's really good at knowing your environment. And the leading coding products is called GitHub Copilot. It's a partnership between GitHub AI and Microsoft. And I started using Claude AI, who has evolved to be the lead programmer for the team. But we use all the AIs to solve problems. Both GitHub Copilot and JetBrains AI are really good toolsmiths. They are, fix the low-level stuff. But Claude is the only AI that's smart enough to understand the complete system, which is dozens of modules, right? It's a full-blown, essentially full-blown banking system, right? And what I found is that, GitHub or even chat, they get confused by the complexity and then they create a bug and they try to fix it. They generate more bugs, and they're like these projects where every time you fix a bug, you generate 4 more bugs, and then you're you're at the bottom of the barrel. So
you're storing the code on GitHub. It sounds like you're using PyCharm from JetBrains.
Yeah.
And so these 6 different AI personas, are they all essentially chatbots, or what's the manifestation of them? Is it a chatbot that you're operating, or
they're essentially chatbot? Although ChatGPT based chatbots now can create Python and run it in their own environment, which is extremely helpful. So I've had chat say, I need this, and chat would say, write me some code for this. Chat say, okay, here's the code, I'm going to run it. Oop, I ran into a bug. Let's try something else. It'll try 10 different things, and then this library doesn't work. We'd have to try that library. And, 30 to 60 seconds later, it's tried 10 different libraries. It's fixed 20 bugs. And it says, okay, now this works. It's more than a chat bot, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, are any of these AI team members interacting with each other, or are you the interactor with each of them?
What we found is, first of all, the AIs do not do software any better than they know Scrum. They're trained on the internet, right?
Right.
And so you just turn them loose and they produce bloated, crappy code that's full of bugs. It was extremely painful booting these up. So you have to train them in software architecture, in object-oriented design, in acceptance test-driven development, in automating tests. And right now they can't easily talk to one another, which is extremely painful. So what I had to do is every AI if they make a run of the system, they produce a complete report as part of that 1 second run that has all the code, all the acceptance tests, and a summary of the state of the project. So I can take that and give that to another AI, and they can boot up immediately right from that state.
Gotcha.
And then help out.
Okay.
They're also really important for code reviews because these AIs, you say, okay, we need to fix this bug, and then they'll give you back a new piece of code, and they've left out stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they generate another bug. So every time an AI creates a piece of code, we have to do a code review.
Right.
I often do it myself, but actually another AI does a better job because they will give a comprehensive code review, which I then feed back to the AI that's coding and make sure like the prime directive of the whole project is every script is complete.
Mm-hmm.
It's executable. It loses no functionality. It's been code reviewed by more than one AI. And only then is it worth any AI or human trying to run it. And we constantly have to be, right now I'm working on a new project and the AI doesn't understand object-oriented design very well. So we have this design of this, this is kind of a sets of data, and the data is structured. It has a header, it has subcomponents and subcomponents, and you've got to get that object design right to have the code be working right.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thrashing with days with all the AIs. I'm at the point now where I'm actually having them write a specification document on the object structure that every AI has to read and study before they can even touch the code. Because right now, every time they touch it, they create a bug, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
Where I'm hoping, in a couple of weeks, I'm hearing today that Strawberry out of OpenAI is going to be released, and we're going to get some huge upgrade. And I hope, I'll immediately upgrade the AIs, and I'm hoping they will stop generating so many bugs.
Yeah.
I hope they will start to understand software architecture,
Sure.
system development, object-oriented technology. I hope. But the problem is they're all trained on the internet, and the internet is full of crap.
Full of conflicting information. So as we get to the end of our time here, teams that are attempting to be hyper productive right now, and you have all of the haggling over things that are in the weeds that are totally off base, and what guidance would you give for the listeners that are just trying to do a good job now, looking to the future and what we can use AI for, but what are the big takeaway lessons that you would leave them with?
Here's the takeaway. I have Apple developers in my training.
Mm-hmm.
And one day one of them said, "Do you know why Apple is always on time?" I said, "No, why?" They said, "Because they do Scrum by the book. They're not arguing about all this nonsense." I said, "What book?" He said, "The red book, the book that's right behind me. It's the second edition. It's been completely updated. It's almost twice as many chapters. And it specifically shows you how to do hyperproductive Scrum. And as soon as you put it into ChatGPT, Chat knows how to do Scrum for the first time." So I would recommend to all your listeners that you do what Apple does. You take that book and you follow it explicitly. And then you go to my ChatGPT Scrum Sage Zen edition that has Ono, the Scrum Master, in it, who understands that book and every book that Ken and I have ever written. And you ask him questions about that book and questions about your Scrum team. And then you will be off and running. But if you're sitting around staring at each other's navel, debating on how long the sprint should be, you're going to be unemployed very soon. There's a lot. Companies are laying off developers 10,000 at a time.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're talking about the book, just the art of doing twice the work in half the time.
Yeah.
Is the book
And
you're
that's
talking
only
about.
the beginning, because by 2030, you have to be 30 times faster to survive. My first principles of Scrum book is going to train you how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So twice the work and half the time is like putting your toe in the water.
Yeah. Yeah. Just getting started.
You're just getting started.
Yep. Awesome.
And if you can't do that, I mean, there's no hope for you, right?
Yeah.
And people, I can't tell you how many Scrum trainers and coaches say, "Oh, Jeff, you shouldn't talk about twice the work and half the time. It's going to put pressure on the team." Hey, if you can't do better than that, you're going to be out of a job really, really soon. But if you move up the technology stack that we've talked about in principles at Scrum,
Mm-hmm.
and you move to extreme Agile, you are going to be busting the balls of your competition.
Yeah.
And you're going to be there when everybody else is fading away. So,
All right. Extreme Agile.
Start with twice the work and half the time, and then go to extreme Agile and first principles of Scrum. That will show you how to do it.
Okay. We'll include links to those books in the show notes and everything we talked about. Jeff Sutherland, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing about the history of what became Scrum and the theory behind it, and also your current work and predictions, guidance into the future. It's fascinating for me, and I know for the listeners. So thank you so much.
I've never been more excited about Agile.
Yeah.
So you really need to get with where things are going right now, which is huge.
So Jeff, is there any way that listeners can get involved with the work that you're doing?
Well, the most interesting work I've done in the last month or two is work with a bunch of AIs to create this new expense report program that automatically does all your expenses without you have to use any app.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm looking for beta users. So anybody that's interested can send an email to support@quickaireports.com. And the way it works, I give you a link to an AI, and the AI starts talking to you and says, "Well, here's what I need to do all your expense report for you."
Mm-hmm.
And then just walks you through, and you create a little Dropbox folder with all your bank statements in it and give the AI that link, and the AI does all your expense reports.
Nice.
You never have to use another expense report app again, ever.
That would be awesome.
How great is that?
That would be awesome. That'd be awesome. All right. So what's the email address again?
Support@quickaireports.com. All
Perfect.
one word, quickaireports.com.
Perfect. All right.
And you'll be working directly with me, but also with the AI who's going to do most of the heavy lifting.
Nice. Nice. All right. And dear listener, thanks for being with us. And until next time, keep shipping.
You've been listening to the Azure DevOps Podcast, a show for developers and DevOps professionals shipping software using Microsoft technologies. Go to www.azuredevops.show for show notes and other episodes. On behalf of your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and our sponsors, thanks for listening, and may God bless you.